Righto, hose management. It's a topic many of us have had exposure to, so whether it's during machine design, building or assembling hoses, or just the process in general from a site perspective. So we've just come back from lunch, let's get our brains into gear with a bit of a short quiz, shall we? So question 1, what is the leading cause of hose failure? Can I get hands up for answer A, overpressurization? No takers. Answer B, abrasion. That's a lot of hands, that's looking pretty good. And answer C, age. Ooh, a couple down the middle. Answer is abrasion. So this really goes to show how important our installation quality is, making sure our hoses aren't rubbing on other hoses or cables or adjacent components. Righto, next question. How many linear meters of wire is found in a single centimetre of typical spiral hose? Answer A, half a metre. No hands. Answer B, 10 metres. A couple? Man, you guys have got the answer surely. Answer C, 7 metres. God, you're on to it.
Wrong.
Correct answer, 7 metres, far out. I can't believe you knew that one. Last question. Contamination control is important to ensure hydraulic systems operate reliably. So what are the typical clearances for a hydraulic circuit? Hands up for A, 100 microns. Answer B, 30 microns. There's a couple. Or answer C, 50 microns. Most of the people. Answer is B, 30 microns. So this goes to show the average human hair has a diameter of about 80 microns. So a lot of these particles we can't even see with the naked eye, getting in our systems and contaminating them and causing damage. So we're here to talk about hydraulic hose management primarily from the perspective of Bengalla Mining Company. So for those of you who don't know, Bengalla is a surface thermal coal company based in the Hunter Valley, about an hour and a half north of Newcastle and 15 minutes outside of Muswellbrook. So currently producing about 10 million tonnes per annum of coal, looking to expand to 13.4 million tonnes per annum. So as Mick said, my name's Sean Barrett. I work for Bengalla Mining Company as the mine mechanical engineer. I've been here for about 2 years now and previously spent another 2 years with Glencore in the graduate program.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Rob Leiss. I'm the Business Development Manager for Hose and Couplings for Westrac in New South Wales. I've been in the position just over 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was with Hastings up in Queensland and currently in Newcastle. So next we're going to show a short video outlining a bit more about Bengalla as an operation, our hose management solutions, and how Bengalla and Westrac work together to make all this happen.
My name's Anton Nickel. I work for Bengalla in the New Hope Group, and I am the reliability analyst. Bengalla is a single cut open pit mine, and we supply international markets with thermal coal. Bengalla is quite a unique site in the respects that we've got quite a mixed fleet. We've got 37 trucks, 15 dozers, we've got a drag line, 7 excavators. So running 24/7, it puts a lot of stress on our suppliers. We had a truck go down and the wait time on that was 3 hours from either supplier or a hose specialist. But the guys had their hose done in 15 minutes and the truck was able to go straight back to work. When you're dealing with downtimes, you need the hose assembly ASAP.
The broader New Hope group, they used the CAT hose solution on other sites in Queensland. So we knew it was proven. We then started working with Westrac, our local dealer, and got a solution that we believed fit our business. We selected the package that gave us everything, which was from procurement management right through training, through to the end product, all the product support, the HIS system, everything we needed.
In the past we've had issues with the installation of the hoses, the rubbing, heat, all that sort of stuff. When you're dealing with stuff in the pit and you've got to get your tier 1 machines up and running again, you don't want a 3-hour wait time. Well, for us it makes sense. 15 minutes, the guys can call from the pit and we can have a hose ready before they get to the hose workshop.
Westrac's been an integral part of implementing the hose container solution, and the good relationship we've got with Westrac has really made it succeed.
This container here is the workshop. This is where everything happens. And then we've also got a storage solution outside, and that's where we store all our stock items. Our inventory management is basically controlled by our computer systems. So whenever stocks get low, it automatically gets reordered and we get trucks to the gate twice a day.
The local support from Westrac is really good. So, the raw materials that go into making a hose assembly, we've got that good response that we can get those materials. We try to control the inventory so that we've got what we need in advance.
Quality of the cat hoses and Hutlings, like their rugged design and their tough manufacturing processes they got, they're unrivaled, to be honest. Another part of having this hose solution is that we can standardise all our process across site for the whole of the mixed fleets. We're already seeing roughly 40% sort of cost savings on OEM supply. Where we really get our cost savings is from the intangible benefits of production downtime. So when you multiply that tangible benefit across the whole fleet for over a year period, the savings are significant. If we can give production more time to use the machinery, then they've got more time to produce safe, profitable coal.
That brings us to our next point, why manage hydraulic hoses. So it's not an easy or fun task by any means, but as we know, the first priority is to maintain the health and safety of our persons on site. So this is not only our operators, but also our maintainers and even passers-by of the equipment. Introducing hydraulic power to machines and equipment on site brings with it a few risks as well. So obviously there's fire, there's fluid injection risks, there's impact due to whipping hoses and machine malfunction. So if a hose lets go on a safety critical circuit such as steering or braking, we could have some pretty serious consequences occur. So lucky enough for us, we have this document MDG 41, which the regulator has released for us for use in some guidance on managing our hoses and our fluid power systems in general. So this document is really a baseline for sites to base our management procedures from. It looks at a bunch of the components that make up these systems and provides some guidelines around that, particularly through the whole life cycle of those systems as well. So from design and specification, installation, commissioning, maintenance, operation, and even disposal. So it's really a good document for us to use as a baseline, as I said. Next, we can see on the right side of the slide there, there's a typical page we get from our maintenance and service manuals from the OEM. So again, this provides us a good baseline to base our maintenance strategies from. It shows that we're doing our due diligence as well, that we consider that's putting machine strategies together. And lastly, obviously we want to reduce our equipment downtime as well, make our production brothers happy by giving them the equipment to use and make some more money for the business. So we know that reliable equipment is productive equipment, reliable equipment is cheaper equipment, and reliable equipment is also safer equipment. So now looking at the relationship between hydraulic hoses and HME fires. So a bit of a comparison between the industry statistics and Bengallas for the period between April 21 and June 2022. In the industry, we can see there's 252 fire events in that period, and instances where hoses and fittings were the contributing factor were about 31%. So it was the highest out of all the different categories, so quite concerning there. Comparing this to Bengalla's performance in that period, it was a bit of a rough one for us. We had 20 fires in that time, 11 of those caused by hoses and fittings. But we'll unpack this a bit further through the use of some graphs to show the trends that we saw. So as an industry, we can see it's sort of been pretty flat. The line graphs show the total number of fire instances for that reporting period, and the columns there represent the instances where hoses or fittings were the failed component. So the industry stayed pretty level throughout that period of time, where we can see at Bengalla, we've had a pretty reasonable decline in the instances of fires on site, which is really good to see. We can also see that the incidents caused by hoses and fittings failing has also declined as well. From the start there, around the 21 period to the end of 2021, had a dramatic reduction there. And that coincides with the introduction of the hose container at the front end of 2021. So it's made quite an impact in a short amount of time. Looking now at the process that we go through when we acquire a new fleet on site, before that equipment lands and is put to work, we conduct a hose risk assessment. So typically we'll engage a third party for our instances. We use Complete AMS as our provider. They'll split the machine into all the different hose groups, looking at not only the hydraulic systems, but also grease systems, engine oil, fuel systems, the whole lot. Next, we gather all our stakeholders. This will include the equipment manufacturers, our maintenance teams, production teams, and even the hose production team as well, to get all that expert input. We then get into a room and work out all the different risks associated with those hose groups and the individual hoses themselves, and form that into a risk assessment. So a typical output from this risk assessment is our high risk hose register. We can see on the left side of the table quite a bunch of information about the hose itself and the hose group, and then we move across into the categories of which we assess against. So for every hose on a machine, we look at the potential to contact an ignition source if the hose fails, so this speaks to our fire risk, the operator and maintainer exposure, and also the system pressure. So this talks about our fluid injection risk primarily. If it's part of a safety critical system, as we discussed, abrasion risk, so we've got to know where these hoses are located on the machine so we can see if there's any adjacent components or it's a tight area where other hoses are run as well. If it has a known history of failure, so we benchmark from other sites whether this hose has been known to fail in the past, and accessibility. So accessibility seems like a bit of a strange one to assess, though we know from experience that a hose that it's easy to access has a much higher chance of being inspected well and being installed to a higher quality as well. Breaking this down, this is a snapshot of one hose group from one machine. So this is the master raise hose group from a CAT MD 6250 drill. Up the top, we have a lot of the risk assessment type stuff and the hose details. And then the lower table sort of leads into our hose build consist. So we can see if it's got burst sheathing, fire sleeving, or spiral wrap applied to the hose. And then also it transitions into our maintenance piece as well. So for this hose group, we can see all those hoses are annually audited. So they have released a work order, the maintenance technicians look at these hoses on an annual interval, and then also the replacement interval, so 15,000 hours for all these hoses are about 2.5 years. So again, leading into the maintenance piece, all these hose groups are replaced on an hours-based strategy, so we know that hoses wear and degrade over time as they age. We manage this through our CMMS on site, which is Pulse. So each of the hose groups for each machine have a line in Pulse, which is the replacement job. So in these replacement jobs, we have not only the hose parts, but also the sleeving parts, any clamps and seals required for the fitters to install that hose to the required standard. Next, we talk about why build hoses on site. So one of the huge benefits that was sort of unrealised at the beginning was the training and knowledge piece that's been transferred to the maintenance technicians. So Westrac, acting as an RTO, has delivered a nationally recognised qualification to our guys, so to install and fabricate fluid hose assemblies for our gear. So there's about 30 of our maintenance technicians that are now trained up to build the hoses and install them as well. So one of the interesting parts, these guys do a theory and practical components through this training. Through the theory, they learn about the hose constructions, the different applications of each hose, and even some of the hose standards. Moving on to the practical side, they complete some of the fitting identification work. As we can see here, the guys pretty intently looking at these fittings and trying to work out what they are. And they also have a trip into the hose production container where they build a few hoses as well. So that's been really instrumental in improving the guys' baseline knowledge. It's helped improve our defect identification on hoses and also our installation and repair quality. In terms of the knowledge, so the hose container consists of 3 primary personnel, the hose coordinator and 2 hose production technicians. These guys have a wealth of knowledge in the industry, and the knowledge that these guys have, they transfer onto the maintenance technicians in the field. So it's been really instrumental in improving our knowledge of hoses on site. Next, by having the manufacturing facilities on site, we have a high level of control over the hoses we fit to our equipment as well. So commonly we'll see if a hose needs to be slightly lengthened or shortened to improve the routing on the machine, so we can achieve that in a matter of minutes rather than the hours that it would take to engage a third party to complete the same result. In terms of traceability, each hose is fitted with a minimum of 1 tag, which has some key information on it. So this will have the work order number the machine the hose was produced on, when it was manufactured and who manufactured it. So it's just a quick reference for the fitters in the field to see how old that hose is and where it's come from. In terms of storage, we have that CAT storage container for all our fast-moving hoses. So this is really good for the guys on back shifts to reach in, quickly grab the hose they need and not have to complete a build. In contamination control, we've adopted the CAT cleanliness standards. So we can see an example there of the wadding process. They blow a foam wad through the hose and clean out any contaminants prior to storage or installation to a machine. And then quality control, Westrac and Bengalla complete audits on the hose container and the manufacturing processes to make sure everything's up to standard. Obviously, with this building hoses on site comes some cost benefits. So for our non-CAT fleets on hose products, we save approximately 70% over the OEM prices, and for our CAT fleets, we save approximately 20% on the OEM prices. So over the few years this hose container has been in service, we've saved in the magnitude of millions of dollars on hoses and hose products. And also having this production facility on site, there's a huge focus on hydraulic hoses and hoses in general. So this container at the back of the workshop is a constant reminder to the guys that there's people in that container that take these hoses very seriously. They have a huge amount of attention to detail and care for the work they do, and that's contagious to the rest of the workforce. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Sean. So just a little bit about Westrac itself. So we're a Caterpillar dealer that specialises in the earth moving and energy part of the business. We're in WA and here in New South Wales as well. A little bit about the history as well between Bengalla and dealers. They've had a strong relationship, certainly with Westrac and to other dealers around as well. So there's a good connection there. As well as that, it's important to note that this solution in its inception was the first for Caterpillar worldwide. It's never before has Caterpillar supported a fleet, a non-cat fleet of around 70% on site. So it was a huge project from Caterpillar in the last 5 to 10 years. There's been a big push to try and put our product onto non-cat machines, not exclusively just on Caterpillar machines. At the end of the day, the hose itself is very reliable and we want to push that market as much as we can. So a bit about the history of the product itself when it comes to hoses. Caterpillar started making their own hoses in the late 60s, as far back then, and essentially the reason was because there was nothing else on the market that could handle higher breakout forces that customers were requesting at the time. So the competitors didn't have, they had an inferior hose available, a braided hose. They needed to move to spiral hose. So Caterpillar are actually the creators of the spiral hose, which could handle higher cycle times and higher pressures. So ever since then, from that period forward, they essentially own their own factories when it comes to producing bulk hose and couplings. So they actually control that recipe. It's a massive advantage over most of our competitors because if we need to act quickly in a fast-paced environment, we can. So that's extremely important to understand and the whole journey. That whole control piece from the hose being built in the factory to it being on the customer's machine. So a little bit about the container solution itself. So here's the container itself. It's not big, but it is demountable, so they can move it on site. So essentially it's two 40-foot containers with the innards removed to form a small workshop. And in that workshop, we've got a bit of a system flow where essentially the bulk hose is picked at the rear, cut, crimped into our 325 cat crimper, and then if needed, the pressure tester is involved for critical lines. So we've got, as Sean mentioned, we've got 2 shifts, 12/7, effectively 364 days a year. And we've got about 30 to 35 Bengalla technicians trained by Westrac to fill in the gaps. So that gives us a few distinct advantages. It's an education piece for the technicians on the floor when they're actually installing hoses, understanding how the product works, how it's built, how it's routed on the machine, and this is translated to fewer incidents. It also gives coverage. So if the technicians in the container aren't there or they're busy, we can have technicians across every shift come into the container and build hoses to help out with production. So yeah, pretty big advantage. So here's just a layout of its original form right at the start. It also ties into the CAT, what we call crimputer. It's effectively a touchscreen that's attached to the crimper. And effectively, this is a process that Caterpillar uses to mitigate human error when it comes to hose building. So the information that's provided on the PLC is effectively instructing the technicians what to do at every point. Now, all the inputs, every user, every technician that's trained actually has a distinct username and password, which means all that information that when they build a hose, is all logged into the system. And Bengalla download that information daily. So they pull that information out of the system, not only for transparency and accountability, but also from an inventory piece to make sure that there are no stock discrepancies. Stock discrepancies translates to more downtime in the machine. You don't have the parts you need for the hose you need to build. So it's important to understand. So the labels that get printed out as well, obviously follow in the guidelines of MDG 41, which is just hose best practice on site. And through that, all the information's available to the customer, to the technicians on the machine. They can see when it was built. They can see who built it. It's got QR codes for easy reordering. It also gets tied into what we call our Cat Inspect app, which is just effectively a platform on your phone, an additional tool to use to help understand and track hoses on a machine. So if you deem a hose to be nearing the end of its life, it needs to be replaced in, say, 4 to 6 months, that information can be captured in the Cat Inspect app, and then you are reminded at that time to replace the hose. So a very powerful tool if the customer wants to use it. So Bengalla also opted for the 20-foot storage container. So effectively it's 12 racks, up to 650 hoses can be stored in those racks. You're looking at about 3.6 tons worth of hoses at full capacity. The unit itself doesn't look like much, but it actually weighs about 15 to 16 ton. The base of the container is laden with concrete. This is just basically, in the unlikely event all the racks are open, the container won't tip over. So we've got a numerous amount of safety features in this fairly bespoke container. It's also got whirlybirds for climate control. There are options for laser engraved plaques with QR codes to help with ease of reordering to eliminate human error as much as possible. And it also provides a means for Bengalla to stock hoses that are used very commonly, that are used regularly, and the site can use the economies of scale to full effect and build 20 at a time rather than having to sort of interrupt builds to get that machine going. So it's really an efficient tool if used correctly. So the other part of the puzzle that's probably actually the key part is the database where we actually keep all the information for these hoses. So we call it HIS, Hydraulic Information System, and effectively it's a centralized database for the technicians to go to, a one-stop shop for all the information that they need. It's critical to understand that this is an incorruptible data source. So effectively, no one can change the information on these consists. At the end of the day, we're dealing with high-pressure hoses. If anyone knows, I've been on mine sites when it comes to replacing hoses, certainly with competitors, and certainly Westrac in the past, have built hoses where hoses will grow or shrink over the time of the machine. And that can lead to premature failures, can lead to incidents. This is a digital database, which means you're building the hose to the consist as it should be, rather than visually as it's presented in front of you. It's also more efficient when it comes to actually producing hoses, and you can organize your inventory around it as well. So it's a very good tool. It also has information about product updates in regards to tips and tricks, videos, all that sort of stuff. So we try and centralize it as much as possible to form that one-stop shop. So here's a basic printout or a screenshot of what the technicians would see when it comes to putting in a hose. As you can see, you're given a couple options when it comes to bulk hose. That means you can switch between inventory if needed. It also gives you cut length, overall length, armor, angle of orientation, seals, etc. Any notes that need to be put in there. Now, the other benefit for this, and the solution that Bengalla has signed up for, is that we can edit this data. So if the OEM, any OEM, whether it's us or non-Cat machines, where we feel the hose isn't up to the standard that it needs to be, where the customer feels that, we can actually go in there and include burst sheathing, spiral wrap, etc., to basically go above and beyond for what the customer wants. So that's the extremely important tool. I've seen a lot of solutions where people use a spreadsheet, even just writing down on pieces of paper. This mitigates that risk completely. So non-Cat hoses, I spoke on about how 70% of Bengalla's fleet's non-Cat. That equates to probably about 2,600 hoses that actually need to be converted and put into this database. And it's a trust relationship between supplier and customer, which I think this is quite a good example of that trust. So the information that we actually put into the system when it comes down to it, we're looking at working pressure, making sure that it's appropriate for the circuit. We're looking at also whether or not it's the outside diameter of the hose basically means that you don't have to replace the hardware on the machine. So making sure that the clips and grommets and Storf clamps can be reused and it doesn't introduce extra errors. In fact, we're extremely transparent when it comes to actually hoses that we can't build. We share that information with site and say these are the hoses we can't do. We can source them externally from somewhere else, but there's too much of a risk if we do build them. So that's an important note. Looking at coupling sealing types, ambient temperature, the temperature of the fluid conveyed, and also whether or not it's a critical hose. That's the other thing. Just because the OEM hose doesn't have sheathing on it, that's what the customer might want, so we actually include that in it. So I was talking about to bring around 2,000 to 2,500 hoses on the system. We actually have about 20 to 25 data inputs per hose. So it's a lot of information that's captured in the background. That information is obviously fed through to Westrac, and we feed that back to the US, and they compare that against global data. And then it's populated into HIS once it ticks all the boxes, and it goes in there. But it's a lot of work and effort goes into it to ensure that information is reliable. So some of the challenges, I think everyone can see from the size of the solution that we've put in place at Bengalla, there are numerous challenges, and certainly when it comes to new machines. Bengalla has a very mixed fleet, lots of different OEMs. That means different sealing types, different standards, all that sort of stuff. So we've got very good communication between the two of us, where we can actually see what new machines are going to be implemented, and we can react accordingly in regards to conversions and ensuring that all the necessary tools and inventory are in the right place. New product to support solutions, so we don't just support mobile fleet at Bengalla, we also support fixed plant as well. So Caterpillar, a big beast that it is, trying to convince them to do something different is definitely challenging, but we've had a lot of success with new parts being integrated purely because of Bengalla. So they're very good successes out of that. Inventory is always a challenge. Anyone who knows anything about hose solutions or hydraulics, massive challenge. The invisible dance between having too much stock and too little, where too much obviously puts a burden financially on the business, and too little, well, that translates to a more downtime on your machine, which is undesirable.
Another thing that we had to consider from a site perspective was the procurement piece and how our planners order these hoses through this dedicated facility on site. So there was quite a bit of challenge with Pulse and Bengalla integrating the two systems. After the first 12 months or so, through a lot of hard work and effort, we've now added the hose container as a sort of internal vendor, if you like. So now it's as easy as the planners punching in the OEM part number, whether it's CAT or another fleet type, that then goes to the hose container. They receive the consist off of HIS, build the hose and stage it ready for the maintenance technicians to fit it to the machine. So it's quite a streamlined process now after some hiccups at the beginning.
Thank you. So I just want to finish on this. This is probably arguably the biggest thing that CAT gets out of this, obviously apart from the sales, but the collaboration piece between Bengalla and Westrac is absolutely perfect. And the information that gets given to us is absolutely unquantifiable. And that can range from all the way from site making systems more efficient, going from it takes 20 minutes to spiral a hose, all the way down to 2 minutes if you just use a simple drill. There's another instance there where we've got a laser on a saw that helps make it more efficient when it comes to accurately cutting hose. Now this is something that was actually introduced afterwards, after the fact. We went to the product group with the US when it comes to tooling, and as a standard now they're putting that on all their saws sold globally. So it's a massive introduction. These small changes make a huge difference. And in fact, some of the information that they've come back with is that this will actually reduce waste by about 1%. So 1%, if you're in New South Wales, you're a relatively medium-sized mine, doesn't sound like a lot, but Caterpillar produce over 30,000 kilometres of hose a year. You take 1% of that, that's a significant reduction in certainly our environmental footprint. And it's changes like this that make these solutions basically affordable and safe as well for the customer.